Good morning, and thank you for joining me for this of our fifth of our webinar sessions over the past 5 or 6 weeks. Thank you for joining again. Many of you have been on our previous sessions, but I can see a few new names, which is great to see. So for those that don't know me, my name's Graham Stead. I'm obviously the client relationship director here, and as the slide says, ultimately that is a sort of a sales and a sort of marketing role. But from a client perspective, my role is really around helping to inform you as our clients and prospective businesses what technology can do to help you. Really, you don't know what you don't know. So, my role is very much around trying to sort of inform you around the various aspects of that technology. So today's session's going to last 35 minutes. As usual, we try and keep these things quite tight, so we don't actually do an open Q&A session at the end. But any questions you do have, fire through on the widget you'll have on your screen, and we'll make sure that we get back to you as quickly as we can after the end of the session to let you know the answers to your questions. So without further ado, let's move on. Again, those that are familiar with our sessions really try and make sure that we have at least the two sort of outcomes that you will get from watching and listening over the next 30 minutes or so. So today we're obviously talking around cyber certification and specifically cyber essentials. So the very clear first aim is to give you a better understanding of what the cyber essentials certification is, if you're not aware. And then secondly, really to be able to give you 5 reasons at least. There are more than 5 reasons, but 5 clear reasons that I guess are relevant to your business that you can take back to the business, discuss with your colleagues, and really demonstrate the clear reasons why you should consider certifying your business to the cyber essentials standards. So that will be the outcome at the end of the couple of weeks. So I always like to try and just put a little bit of context and some background. So I've just got a few slides here around cybersecurity and why really it's important that you do take the security of your sort of business, your IT assets and your data seriously. So this is a slide really just to sort of compare what we're currently in, the computer industrial and digital revolution, computer revolution, what you want to call it, with the industrial revolution, back in the 1800s. My history isn't great, but I think that's when we're talking about. So both had real benefits to economies, people, world, life, etc. But of course, with anything, there's always a flip side. Now, with the Industrial Revolution came pollution, smog, dirt, etc. With the sort of digital computer revolution, then the equivalent really in modern times is cybercrime. Very much all of our data is available, much more easily available to anybody who can get access to it if it's not secured properly. So really just to compare the two. So yes, there's a huge amount of benefits, but equally there are a significant number of risks that need to be managed. Some stats as well, because when I talk to clients and peers, there's a lot of feeling, and I think this is changing, thankfully, but there's definitely a lot of feeling that cyber crime, cyber criminals, really don't target, the SMB style of business. And when I use SMB, I'm really talking about this, the size of businesses we're looking on. So we're not corporate businesses per se. So, I think sub 500 users really, I'm going to sort of just broadly classify as SMB, whether you're a 10 user business or at the higher end of that. I am talking about you guys. So, and there's some stats here that really demonstrate that these cyber criminals really aren't targeting just those corporates. If anything, there's an argument to say actually that they are targeting the smaller, medium-sized businesses more because they're less mature in their security protection. So it's easier target. So some stats here really. I won't go through them all. specifically, but a couple of I really wanted to raise. There's the second stat there: 30% of users open emails from attackers, and then 10% actually click on attachments. So every one of you listening to this webinar today will have somebody, if not multiple people in your business, if they haven't been made aware and trained effectively, who are clicking on links and attachments that are coming through from email. If you then look at that last stat, 91% of cyber attacks start with a phishing email. There's a real strong correlation there between people that are clicking on emails and the source of cyber attacks that coming through, whether that's ransomware or any other particular, password login, any particular breach that can happen. So I guess unless you're only a sort of 5, maybe a 10 user person business, then maybe your 10% doesn't actually equate to a full person, but anything 10 and above, clearly it does. So be thinking about that. This little story here at the bottom, Aaron Brewery, again, was just really an example. It's a slightly old one now. It's 13, 14, well, probably actually getting on a year and a half or so now. But it came up in some of the sort of IT magazines, as it were, that we see here in the industry. And this firm effectively was blackmailed by hackers through ransomware, and you can see there that caused severe disruption to the business. It wasn't able to trade for a while, and actually in this situation they lost 3 months of data from a server. So a massive impact, not only in lost trading, reputation, but whatever that data was will have had an impact to their business. If I look that company up on Companies House, it reported the average number of staff was 17. Now, it may be a bit less, it may be a bit more, but the point I'm trying to make very clearly is that this is not only targeted at corporates. Any business really is a target. So we need to take this extremely seriously. Now, of course, map that against the where we are now, and this I'm not really specifically relating to the current pandemic and the rush to remote working or anything like that. Prior to that, there has been and you'll all be familiar with a swing in IT environments, whether you want to talk cloud or not, more mobile devices, staff working from home. There's an awful lot of change that's going on. So historically, where we operated from an office, had a secure internet connection, we only had to worry about things like antivirus and a firewall, to protect that office and the devices within that office. We're now in a situation where we've got a lot more mobile devices being used. They're not necessarily all owned or controlled by the business themselves. We've got people working from home, and the cyber criminals have become a lot more sophisticated in how they actually try to attack your data. So it is massively changing environment. So it's just making it more complex. The old ways of protecting your data really just are not fit for purpose any longer. So where are the biggest security pains? This isn't intended to be exhaustive. It's really just sort of a high-level summary of really where the biggest risks are to a business. So clearly, email. We've talked a little bit earlier on around phishing email, but below par or poorly managed protection doesn't catch attacks. Even as simply as antivirus. We will all hopefully have antivirus software, but antivirus software has changed massively. So if you're using antivirus software from 3-4 years back, it will not have sufficient protection or type of protection that will protect you adequately against current modern threats. Maybe how do you know every machine's got antivirus on it? How do you know it's up to date with all the latest protection, etc.? There's a whole heap of questions there. So email comes in, people are clicking or opening attachments, and if you haven't got that antivirus per se updated, that's gonna cause you issue. But also accidentally sending confidential data, that's an issue that we've seen within our client base. I'm sure we're all aware of somebody that sent an email to somebody they shouldn't have done by accident. Sometimes they're aware. I'm sure there's plenty where we don't even know it's happened, but Outlook does a great job, doesn't it, of caching names, and there's plenty of Grahams that I know that I'm trying to send it to my colleague Graham Dempster. It will pick up Graham, who's a client, for example. So there are those risks. So it can also be accidental breaching or leakage of your data. Mobility, again, we talked about mobile devices. We tend to see businesses that at one extreme just completely prohibit the use because of security concerns, or at the other end, let be used, but put no control around that. I guess the happy medium as ever is somewhere in between, rather than the two extremes. But if you are at one of those extremes, you've got some issues. Credentials, so usernames, passwords. Again, we're probably all very familiar with the message about not using the same passwords across multiple systems, making sure that our passwords are strong and they're not the name of, I know, our first son and the date of birth, the obvious things that can be guessed at easily, not common words. We've all heard that, but I know, absolutely from, sessions that I run with clients and just doing a sort of a straw poll, people are still not adhering to best practice, and combine that with the fact that attackers have really sophisticated ways of getting at that information. It only takes the one leak, the one incident, the one breach, and there are issues. And of course, finally, there's compliance. GDPR is sort of as a been and gone. The whole sort of furore and activity levels and media coverage, etc., around GDPR has clearly died down from a couple of years back, but it ultimately is legislation that we all have to conform with. Some businesses, some industries are at more risk than others, so the responsibility to put in place adequate security protections and to protect that personal data is critical. And where that isn't in place, not only do you risk the security breach and the consequences, of that directly, you face the consequences of breaking legislation rules and potentially the fines and consequences that come with that. So what is Cyber Essentials? I'm hoping many people have heard of it, but again, it's something that's been increasingly publicised. It's been around for a number of years now, and it is a government backed scheme that actually now is operated by the NCSC, which is the security centre part of the government, and it's really put in place to give businesses the ability to, I guess, gauge themselves against what I would call fundamental best practice, and we'll talk a little bit about those areas in a second. And ultimately, the view being that if every business was conform to these fundamental basics, then UK PLC would be in a much stronger position to protect itself from security incidents and threats, which of course have an impact in the costs, which impacts GDPR, economy, and everything else that comes from that. Cyber Essentials is available in two flavors. There's Cyber Essentials, as it's called, in Cyber Essentials Plus. So I refer to Cyber Essentials as the basic Cyber Essentials, and then the Plus version. Now, in essence, the Cyber Essentials Basic is is an assessment checklist that needs to be completed, and it needs to be verified independently. So from a CMI's perspective, for our clients, we will complete that checklist for our clients, understanding where their IT systems and security are, and effectively there we are then the independent verifier on behalf of our client. Now the client needs to sign the declaration, but we are the independent verifier. The difference then with Cyber Essentials Plus is it takes that verification level a step further and actually needs to be audited by an approved assessor. So it really takes that sort of independent verification to the next level, and actually, you are tested. So it's not so far as an ISO audit, but it does go so far. And actually, if you say, for example, yes, we have antivirus on all of our machines, they may take spot check, 5–10% of your devices and make sure that yes, antivirus is installed, it's up to date, etc. So there is that that audit by an approved assessor, and of course, the cost then of the Cyber Essentials Plus is a little bit more than Cyber Essentials Basic. Now, if you're aware of Cyber Essentials and you're aware of the ISO standards, so we have ISO 9001 for quality, 14001 for environmental, the security standard, in that sort of grouping is ISO 27001. So I often get asked the question, well, if we've got 27001, do we need Cyber Essentials or the flip of that? Or do we need both? Now, CMI have both, and there are reasons for that. So just to explain a little bit about 27001. So it's, as you'd expect, it's a much more comprehensive standard. So many of you will be a lot more familiar with 9001. So there's over 100 security controls that look into lots of different facets of the business. Now, in some way, that's why Cyber Essentials was actually created, because many businesses didn't go through ISO 27001 because it was too in-depth, it was too costly, it wasn't really required for the business requirements. So Cyber Essentials was really put in place as that much more pragmatic, practical view and get those basics in place. So 27001, a lot more comprehensive. Cyber Essentials ultimately is a UK initiative. There are other areas of the world that are actually looking at the initiative and looking at rolling out something similar, or may already have done so. But Cyber Essentials currently is a UK-only initiative, whereas ISO 27000, as with all the other ISO standards, is an international standard. So, for example, if you operate globally, have lots of clients around the world, they're unlikely to recognise Cyber Essentials, but they will recognise 27001. So that may be part of the decision as to which, or do you go for both. So, the third point there really is you should see them as complementary. There are reasons why you would do each. They're certainly not competitive. It's not one or the other. Equally, it's not the fact you have to have both, but certainly don't come into this thinking you need to do one or the other. Cyber Essentials really is that first step, puts in place the fundamentals, and then if it's appropriate to do so for the type of business you are, the industry you work in, the security risks you have, requirements your stakeholders have, shareholders, clients, government bodies maybe you work with, then you can look to move to ISO 27001, which really just ramps up the maturity of your security practices, not just the technology involved, but the people and the processes involved behind that as well. And I mentioned a second ago, CMI have both those. You'd expect us to have those given what we do within our industry, but they are very, they are applied very differently within our business. So this slide is probably the most technical I'm going to get, and it's not really techie, but it's just going to talk about some of the technical component parts, I guess, of the standard. So within Cyber Essentials, they're called technical controls. These are the control gates, effectively, that you have to sort of pass through in order to gain the certification. So there are 5 pillars really that Cyber Essentials works to. The first being access control. So this is really about securing your internet connection. Clearly, if you didn't have an internet connection, no cyber criminal will be able to get into you. So making sure that internet connection is secure, not only at your office, but home users, mobile devices, etc. Anything, any point of entry into your network, your IT systems, your data from the internet needs to be controlled. And properly managed. Secure configuration across all of your IT devices, and whether that's desktops, PCs, firewalls, servers, whatever that device may be, the hardware, but also the software. So that's really about making sure you have got effective settings. So making sure that things like the password, the default passwords have been changed, that the device is configured appropriately and correctly for the job it's in trying to do with the risks that you face as an organization. Access control, who has access to your data and services? Hopefully none of you have, for example, a file server that is really just a bucket of files where anybody can see, because clearly the the payroll data, for example, isn't something that should be shared. It's an extreme example, of course, but we all have those file structures where marketing can see the marketing folder and finance can see the finance folder, and the directors can see certain bits that the other staff can't see. So it's making sure you have the appropriate access controls to make sure that your data and applications are secure. And that's not only necessarily from within the business. If there's data shared externally with supply chain or clients, then that needs to be considered as well. Malware protection. I talked about antivirus, but that malware protection is really the umbrella name for that. Malware, ransomware, virus, etc. So making sure you've got all that appropriate protection in place, which I touched on before. And then finally, patch management. We're probably all aware that your Apple iPhone updates periodically. New versions come out, no different to Microsoft software does. Adobe, Reader, Java plugins, all those different applications, that actually they are kept updated. As vulnerabilities or security risks are identified and found, then patches are applied to plug that gap. And if you're not applying those patches, your gaps, and those risks remain open. So that final area is around effective patch management to keep everything, up to date as needed. So what's the certification process? Maybe if the business is more familiar with the process of ISO, which, as I say, is a much more rigorous process. I think even ISO is a lot more pragmatic now than maybe it was 10, 15 years back, but it's still a very rigorous process and a standard that you conform with. So Cyber Essentials is actually a very simple certification process. Really it's a case of deciding, do you want to go with basic, Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus. Both assessments actually have the same questionnaire, broadly speaking, that need to be completed. So, we'll complete that on your behalf with the knowledge of your systems. Then, we'll resolve any immediate gaps that are there before submitting for review. Now, I often say if you're a client of CMIs who have been, I guess, actively engaging with us and adopting many of the recommendations that we've talked about over the last 2, 3, 4 years, then you're typically going to be in a situation where it is going to be a very sort of seamless process. There may be a few things that we need to tune, but broadly speaking, very minimal. So it will be very much a sort of a tick box process, application, certification process. So once we've resolved any of those little gaps, we'll submit for review and approval. And if you're going for Cyber Essentials Plus, there will of course then be the independent, audit that needs to get taken. And then finally, the certification body issues certificate, at which point you can, put the logos on your website, promote to your clients, and all the benefits that come with, the certification. So, really now we've gone into the background of why we need to get security seriously, why Cyber Essentials exists, the difference between Cyber Essentials, ISO 27001. So a couple of slides now really on why you should certify. Now, I guess sitting from where I am, yes, I'm a salesperson and we charge a fee for doing this. So, I'm biased, I sit within the IT industry and work there. So I see the consequences of poor security. So of course, I have that experience and I'd encourage. But really, for me, this really is a no-brainer. I really challenge why any business makes a decision not to certify. So, but I accept that's coming from a biased viewpoint. So 5 clear reasons here why you should certify. Now, protecting against those common threats. I called earlier that the five pillars that Cyber Essentials is built on. I reference that to be in the fundamental security that you need to put in place. Now, if we just apply the 80-20 rule, the general I guess benefit being that if you have achieved Cyber Essentials, you have that fundamental basics in place, which will mean that applying 80-20, you're protecting yourself against 80% of threats. There's no there's no standard, there's no security in place that will, protect you 100%. That's just the reality we live in. But by applying Cyber Essentials, it is meaning that you have those fundamental building blocks in place that will protect you from, the vast majority of threats. Secondly, you can demonstrate to clients that you take security seriously. We live in an increasingly competitive, an increasingly risk, security risk environment. Even more so currently with remote working and the fact that we're now sitting, majority of our staff are all working from outside of the protection that we have within our offices, the firewall, for example. So, our clients are going to be looking to us and saying, do you take security seriously, especially if you're responsible for any data, you got information or links into their systems for supply chain reasons. So you will increasingly be expected to have this from your client base. Equally, attract new business. And the point before, if you don't have it and a client wants it, then they're going to go to a competitor. So, the flip of that clearly being is if you have it and one of your competitors doesn't, well, you can go take their clients who want it. So not only does it help you keep your clients, but it will also help you gain clients. Compliance, we talked about earlier. Cyber Essentials, with relevant to GDPR, is a great tool to assist you. And when we were helping our clients through GDPR compliance, a couple of years back, it really was recognised as if many clients went with Cyber Essentials then to demonstrate that they were taking action in order to improve their security, which in order would help them comply better with their GDPR requirements. Now it's not just about GDPR. Any other regulations you might have, PCI, and some of the other international standards or requirements that may be out there, it can help with just by putting those those standards in place. And of course, reduce losses. Security breaches cost money. Now, whether that actually costs physical money because you end up having to pay a ransom for ransomware, or whether you lose revenue because you lose a client, but there are also the the hidden costs. If your staff are unable to work for a few hours or a day whilst your IT partner unencrypted data that's been encrypted without having to pay a ransom, then okay, there may not be any cash cost per se, but that's your staff not working for a day. What does that cost? So there are losses, both in real cash terms, but also in hidden costs. So some 5 really strong reasons there why you really should be certifying. But it's not an exhaustive list. I've just added a few extra here down. Some cybersecurity insurance companies, and I think Hiscox, for example, are certainly one of those, will give you a discount on your cyber insurance if you are Cyber Essentials certified. So there's a cost saving potentially there. You could expand your government contracts. Now, some companies purposely don't work public sector, some do, but if there's an option for you to expand out, then that can help you with your government contracts. I mentioned earlier, it's increasingly becoming a minimum requirement to do business, and I really sort of just reverse that back and say, if I was a client of yours, why aren't you certified? What are the implications? What effectively is that saying? By not certifying or not taking any security standard, you're effectively saying to the client base that, I don't think security is something I really need to worry about. It'll be my opinion. And I think there's also a staff impact here. People want to work for businesses that are professional, conduct business in the right way, an appropriate way, aren't losing clients, etc. But also, when there is a breach, it's very easy to point the finger at the person that clicked that email. So, if the business isn't taking steps to help the individual protect themselves and the business, then there's maybe an unfair burden there on the staff. So you need to consider things like that too. So finally, is it really worth a financial investment? So this slide is really just intended to, I guess, be a little bit thought-provoking, and you can apply the numbers and think about this, but I want us to be thinking around Cyber Essentials as an investment to protect against loss of costs or more revenue, etc., than it is the hard cost of the certification. So really, I've just taken 2,500, 250 staff just to sort of mirror the audience that we have today, and some numbers. So I won't go through it in detail, but just at a very sort of high level, the average UK salary cost is just over £30,000 at the moment. So I'll just use that number. Of course, we need to add about 20% for the NI, employer NI, and the pension and those costs, which means it's about that £36,000. Now, I'm not including any other training costs, recruitment costs, or anything else into that. That's just ultimately the hard cash cost. It costs you as a business using the average UK salary every hour. Comes to that £18.50. So therefore, if you lose an hour in your business as a result of a cyber issue, you're unable to access your systems, or you have to have it returned off while something's cleaned up, every hour costs the business the number based on your staff. So 25 times £18.50 is £462, and obviously that's extrapolated out as the staff grow. Now, certification for Cyber Essentials Basic will typically be in that £2,000 to £2,500 region. So therefore, if you had certification and it did help you prevent those threats that fell into that, say that 80%, it stopped an issue. In essence, that's actually, helping. You need for 25 staff to, have in a half-day security issue. Anything more than that, and you're gaining already. You only need a little over an hour. An issue in a year. This is in 1 year. If there's any more than an hour of outage or issue or disruption to your business as a result of cyber issues in 100 user staff, then that's chewed up the 2,500, and you can go from there. So there's just some numbers from a productivity, a loss of people who had to do the work based on an hourly rate. One way of looking at it. The other way I tend to talk to clients about, if you're not certified and you risk losing clients as a result of that because they need somebody to be certified, or you have a breach and now they've lost confidence and they move on, you each know what your average client worth is. Now, if it's over £2,000, you're immediately at a loss if you lose a client. Or flip that the other way. If you can win business, if you can win a contract that's worth more than £2,000 to you in a year as a result of the fact you're cyber certified, then that's a gain as well. So for me, the real question really is, can you afford not to invest? This isn't like this is a £20,000, £30,000 investment. This is a small investment in order to protect your business. But I guess, that's, as I say, that's biased. That's for you. Plug your numbers in and see how that works for you. Okay, so just final couple of slides, really, a couple of useful resources. I mentioned the National Cyber Security Centre a little while back. So, they've got a great website, lots of useful information. And of course, you can go to gov.uk where there's cybersecurity advice for, it says small business there, but again, within the government context, small business is that, I think you actually class it less than 2,000 staff. So absolutely relevant to our size of businesses. So I recommend, if you want some more information, they're good sources to go and look for. One final little light-hearted story. Just I still can't believe this really happened. I mean, this is 2 years ago now. So this came down to, it was a casino in Las Vegas. Who, as these casinos, especially in Las Vegas, can be very grand, etc. They install this massive, water ceiling, floor to ceiling, sorry, aquarium. But with modern aquariums these days, they can be monitored for temperature, cleanliness, all that stuff that you need is to keep that, and that's hooked into the IT system in order to be able to get that data out to the people that monitor that. Unbeknown to the casino, the hackers had managed to get in via the sensors effectively that were open to the network and therefore open to the internet. So they'd actually hacked into the casino's core IT systems with all their accounts for the people, the gamblers, etc. that play there through the fish tank, through the sensor in the fish tank. This was a couple of years back, but it's just an example of how the increasing number of sensors we use in our lives that are internet enabled actually are a weakness. So just a practical and maybe a little bit of a surprising view to actually the potential issues you can have from a security side of things. Okay, last couple of slides. So I really just want to just say, if you are keen to certify or you're thinking, I'm going to ping everybody on the call an email today, and if you reply saying yes before the end of next Friday, we'll reduce our certification fee down to 18.50. So no hard sell. I'll send you an email. If you're interested, let me know. If you're not, fine. I'm not going to carry on putting any pressure on you. If it's right for your business, great. If you don't think it is, then that's a decision. And really, this is the last of our recent series of webinars. So we will we'll have another series in the not too distant future. But just really a reminder of the previous 4 that we've had. They're all available. The recordings available on our website, newcmi.com/events. So you can get the recordings there. And there's the various topics that we've talked about over the past 4 or 5 weeks, which really pleased to say that the feedback we've been having from those has been really positive, which is great. Excellent. Okay, well, I will leave that there. So just got my contact details there. As I say, I will ping you out an email anyhow. So keep an eye out for that with that offer. If there's any questions, I'll review those after this, and we'll be back in touch. And once again, thank you for your time, and have a great day. Okay, speak soon.